Okay. So yeah, the Children Act 1989 is a really good piece of legislation. We do a lot of international work here at ECPAT. We're part of a network across the world with more than 110 organisations overall. And with that, we do get to that global picture, and we see that other countries, but even those in the UK, they don't have the same protection and the same piece of legislation that we do. So the Children Act is really, really good. And similarly, lots of, and in particular, young people seeking asylum and unaccompanied asylum seeking children, they do not have the same rights that young people here in the UK have, and that is solely because of the Children Act. So it is really good. Another part, if you're maybe from the police or the immigration enforcement sort of sector, or even if you're working with young people in children's services who are unaccompanied children seeking asylum, Section 55 of the Border, Citizenship and Immigration Act is again a piece of legislation that really, really focuses on safeguarding as the top priority when dealing with any sort of young people. Okay, right, I've just seen someone saying how I can mute everyone. I can't see manage participants. Oh yeah, mute all. Sorry. Now I've done that. Okay. So, and then finally, if you look at international law, it is, again, it's there and it's very, very clear in international law. So we have the EU Trafficking Directive. Again, there's a big focus there on what's called best interest determinations in terms of decision making. Even it goes into specific things such as, pardon me, into things like age assessments, and they're being very, very clear that we have to we have the focus on believing the child, and that is the first and sort of assumption that we have, is that we believe the child and we believe their age. So it is there in law. I know as children's services practitioners as well, it's very easy to kind of feel like, you know, if there are requests coming in from immigration enforcement or something, you know, a request for age assessment, if your priority is safeguarding that child. Yes, you do need to age assess them, but you do not need to do a full and entire comprehensive age assessment if you are not concerned that the child is over 18. If you do believe that that child is a child, then you can do a shortened and not a fully comprehensive age assessment, and you can continue to focus on the safeguarding and the best interests of that child. Okay, so now we're going to go back to Mentimeter. And if you can turn again to your phones. Where's Mentimeter? So, when working with child victims of trafficking or victims of exploitation, what makes it most difficult to remain child-centered? So we know, you know, we've had a lot of training as practitioners to focus solely on the child and to take a child's best interest and the paramount importance of the welfare of the child. So we know that, we've been trained that, and I'm not here to lecture on we need to make sure we're child-centered. So, but somehow it does get lost. So I just want some people's ideas here about what they say does make it difficult. Okay, so we've got two already. Great. So I wonder whether, yeah, I can scroll down. Yeah, so really good ones coming up here. There's a lot of them which is quite general to safeguarding work with children, communication barriers, professionals experience or working in that professional network and having to manage those dynamics. Child's wishes may not be possible to fulfill. Absolutely. A lot of young people who maybe are coming from abroad might have very different or very high expectations of what they are entitled to, or what they what they're expecting is a lot, so that it might be difficult to satisfy that. Pressures for other agencies, absolutely. Yeah, so these are all really, really good examples here. Great. So there's a few topics coming up in particular. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff around multi-agency working and professional working, and it's almost as much as managing those dynamics than anything else. A lot of suspicion, yeah. So if we're coming with certain assumptions of people, that is certainly something as well. Lack of trust, absolutely. If you're thinking about the context of the young people that we're working with, they will have trust difficulties with strangers. They're going to have trust difficulties with adults in general, absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you very much for all those. And then the next question. So we're going to look at the child's journey through here and just think about how we can make sure we focus on their best interests. So say we've got a young person, this is first contact with services. We believe that they've been a victim of trafficking or exploitation. And, we're the first point of contact. So what do we need to focus on in terms of immediate safeguarding? Okay. Great. Loads coming in now. I'm trying to read them. I'm getting a bit dizzy. Okay, so we got safeties coming up a lot. A safe environment, safe accommodation, appropriate accommodation, contact with the traffickers. Yep. Secure place to live. Yep. Breaking contact with the traffickers. Yep. Risk of going missing. Excellent. Okay, we've got some really good things on there. I'm trying to read them all before they move, but this is brilliant. Now, if you look at this, and this is what we're kind of saying, can you see how many different things could be on our mind? We maybe are coming across a child, they're in the police station, and we've got to think about all these different things. And this is when I've actually just asked you about focusing on the child, let alone if we're also thinking about contacting different agencies, we're thinking about doing, following these procedures and reporting it in the right way. So there's a million different things that we can think about. Excellent. I really like that we've got building trust with professionals on there. Yeah, first impressions are really, really important with child victims of trafficking. It is the case with most children that we work with. But the difficulty is that if children have been trafficked, then they've been told certain things about professionals. They've been told that they'll be taken to the police station. They'll be told that they're in trouble. They'll be told that if anyone from social services come, then they'll get arrested. They're told all these things by the traffickers. And they might be told, they don't even care if they do find you, they don't care about you. So they'll sort of leave you in a place without any food. There's all sorts of things that they'll be told. We need to make sure that we don't reinforce those things that children have been told by their traffickers. So this is the place that we can do it. And actually, it's a really tight line to walk, actually, because traffickers are very clever in what they tell children. So, for example, they'll tell the main thing that they say is that you're going to be arrested, you're going to be criminalized and things. And actually, mostly on first contact with any sort of worker or professional, a police officer might be called and they might be taken to a police station. and that is for their own safety, absolutely. But can you see already it looks like exactly what the trafficker has told them. So if they see that the trafficker was maybe telling the truth about them going to a police station, they might very quickly believe that everything else that they were told about what's going to happen to them is true, when it's not. And part of our research, we have heard a lot of stories about what they are told about professionals, and I'm not surprised that they don't trust us, to be honest. So yeah, this is really, really good. I'm going to switch back over to presentation now. Okay, so all I wanted to focus us on is that we've got all those millions of things in our mind. Let's just really, really go back down to basics. Okay, simple questions, and the young people that we interview, they really appreciate this. Asking when the last time they had food was, asking when the last time that they had their clothes changed. That is really important. And I've heard really powerful accounts of a young person who meets a professional that gets it really right, and how safe just having that change of clothes felt to him. Or the first question that was asked of him after something like "what's your name" was, have you eaten? And that is just setting the tone for the relationship, compared to something like where did you come from, or some sort of interviewing, or something which comes from an investigative stance instead of a safeguarding stance. Medical attention, it might not always be obvious what that medical attention is, but we do need to be very aware of it. As well, what was highlighted was medical health, mental health. So as well as physical health, we need to think about mental health, and just be very alert to that. Something that you should know is that young people, if they are potentially an unaccompanied child who has been trafficked into the UK, they've had a very long and difficult journey, and they are used to hiding any sort of pain or any sort of suffering, because it's necessary to survive the journey. So we need to go beyond saying, are you hurt anywhere, and be alert to the child might still be hurt, and we wouldn't have a clue. We actually found out recently, we're working with a young person who we've worked with for about 10, 11 months. And she told us not that long ago, it was only once lockdown had just about started, she told us that she had tuberculosis and she needed medication, and she hadn't told us that before. We do check the young people's health, and we try and be as attentive as possible, but we weren't alert to that, and we were relying on her to report it. And she was like, oh, it's not a problem. It wasn't a problem before, and she'd never mentioned it. So it just shows, even though she had tuberculosis, she thought it wasn't much of an issue at all. So that is the kind of experience of these young people, is that they are used to dismissing their health. Accommodation was talked about. Absolutely, we need to think about appropriate accommodation. We need to think about all these sort of things. What type of accommodation? Is it going to be close by? Is it going to be far away? What other young people might they, to make sure that they're safe with other young people? It's really complicated, safe accommodation. As people also pointed out, we're worried about missing as well. So yeah, and that is intricately linked to that. We do have a whole training course on safe accommodation and missing from care for child victims of trafficking, and it's based on our research in this area, but it is a really key area, and I can't go into it really in any more detail right now, just because of time and how complex it is as an issue. And then we've got safety, security, and explanations. Okay, again, it's things that we might not initially think about. Is asking, are they worried about? Have they got any family members that they're worried about? Have they got friends that they're worried about? Do they feel safe? How can we make them feel safe? Has anyone explained to them where they are? what they're doing, who are these people around. Yeah, so we just need to remember that even though a child may be physically safe, it's very different being safe and feeling safe. We need to work out how we make a child feel safe. If a child does feel safe, then things like risk of missing is a lot um, less likely to happen. I've tried not to look at the chat because I get a bit put off by it, but I've just seen that someone mentioned Lightless Sky by Gulwali Pasali, I think that's how you say it. It is a brilliant book, and it's a really, really good account actually of what some of these journeys are like. I think it's really essential, and actually in our safe accommodation and missing from care training, I do quote passages of his book in the book because he explains why he ran away. And it's really powerful actually because he says how he could tell that the people cared, but because of certain factors, he just felt like he was still in a jail instead of in a children's home or in safety. So yeah, absolutely keep, if you can get that book and read it, please do, but keep talking in the chat, but I just might not be that responsive to it. Okay, so the next thing sounds really simple. Believe in the child. This is probably the thing that comes up most when we talk to young people, is that they do not feel believed. They feel like they are being interrogated. They feel like everything is being questioned. And generally, they just get this sense that they are not believed. Okay, this is a general trend that we see. This is not every child, and actually when you hear a child's account of where their experiences of services are that they are believed, it's really amazing to hear what that good work can be. So I'd say that we absolutely need to come from a position of believe in the child. Remember, safeguarding is our top priority. It's not investigating the exact accuracy of a child's account. It's making sure that child is safe. Okay, I'm going to try them, and then they're moved back in to foster care. So we had an example of a girl who actually was exploited and became pregnant when she was in adult care, an adult accommodation. And then, we were able to support her in terms of getting documentation from her country of origin. And then when that happened, she moved back into foster care. But by that time, she was already pregnant, and actually she really, really struggled. So I understand that it is a balancing risk. All I'd say is in terms of age assessments is that it's not enough to be Merton compliant. We need to be case law compliant. There's a lot of case law which has come out in even recently at the end of last year. It is very, very well founded in case law that we need to focus on and really give the child the benefit of the doubt, because the evidence is there that it is well protected, because so often young people are being classified as adults. So yeah, that's what I'll just say about that. Okay, we're going to talk about retraumatization. That's something that we really need to focus on as well. So I'm going to go back to the Mentimeter. So in terms of re-traumatization, what sort of processes and what sort of things can re-traumatize children who may have been trafficked? Yeah, while people are writing that, I understand that often when we're sort of watching videos like that as professionals and as children, someone who used to work in children's services, I was really deflated sometimes by listening to that. But I think it's really important that we do listen, and then also listen to when they say, when they get it right, it's amazing. So I know it is a bit deflating, but yeah, overall, and that video was done in 2017, we do hear young people coming to us with a lot better experiences as well. Okay, so retelling of the story, unstable placement, not believing. Yeah. Someone's asked us if we can share the video, and unfortunately we can't share the video. We have worked hard to make sure that it's anonymous for young people. We do believe that we've done that. We do share it in training, but we don't allow anyone else to have a copy of the video, just in case people can be identified. So sorry about that, but we do have a longer version of that video, and it is in our training. Yeah, okay, so coming to face-to-face with traffickers in the local area. Excellent, absolutely. And in terms of as well, there's a lot of cases of young people coming and telling their story, and then, you know, they put them in the room with the person who alleges they're their auntie or something, and is said, this is what the child says, is this true? And, you know, having to confront their trafficker, it's really difficult. We've also had occasions, unbelievably, of where a trafficker has actually been part of an asylum tribunal, and also as an age assessment judicial review, giving evidence against the child, saying that that child is an adult. It can happen. You know, traffickers are very sophisticated in how they work with professionals, how they conceal the true relationship with the child, but it is scary, and a child does come into contact with their traffickers. It's really difficult. Repeating the story, absolutely. Unstable professional relationships, yeah. So there's another, as well as repeating the story, there's another strand that I'm seeing in here in terms of meeting lots of new people, you know, things changing a lot, unstable placements, yeah, being blamed, not being believed. Yeah, this is absolutely all the different things that we do see. Yeah. Okay, right, I'll just go on to okay. And in terms of when we think about re-traumatization, think about this mind map that we got here. So we got a young person at the front, but then look at everything else that they've got around. So they've got all these things going on. They've got pressures from home. Often family members will owe a lot of money, which is how the trafficking started in the first place. So you might have a young person who is getting phone calls from home all the time talking about earning money or things like that. You've got young people worrying about their employment tribunals. You've got maybe a lot of young people have criminal justice charges brought against them. Then you've got all the social services reviews. You've got age assessments. You've got maybe a college interview. Alongside that, you've got your substantive interview for your asylum claim. You're worried about money. You're worried about deportation, custody, all of these sort of things that go on. And then with every single one of those people, with every single one of those processes, you've got lots of different people. So what's on this slide is overwhelming, but it's actually not all of it as well. And when we talk to young people, they talk about letters. I don't know if you've heard this, but all these letters that these young people get, and they are struggling with the language. They don't understand what these letters mean. They don't know what there is expected of them. And it's something that we do hear, that young people, when they get a letter, it's very anxiety provoking. And I just think that is very telling with all these different, it just shows everything that's expected with them. And, you know, they might have all these different appointments, and with every appointment comes a letter. And young people don't understand it, and they're really struggling to manage. So the whole system is very traumatic for them. It is very stressful. I might preempt a question about COVID-19 here. What we've found is we were quite worried when lockdown happened and everything. Some of our young people have struggled, but actually a lot of the young people are doing really, really well. And it's because of what's on this screen. There's less of all of this. There's less, you know, expectations from them. They don't feel pressured from all these different appointments that they don't understand. So it isn't just all good, but we were surprised about how young some of our young people were doing a lot better. And when we talk to them, it's because of this. There's all these normal pressures which are on them, which is just too much for them, and it can be very traumatic. So I'm just going to give a couple of ideas. Some of them have already been discussed. Some of them, yeah, may be quite obvious, but there's some that maybe are less obvious. So not being able to understand. So that's about the language. And even if they understand English, what about the professional language that we have here? It is a very common experience of a young person being trafficked is not knowing what's happening and not being able to understand. Strange adults, I've already discussed. They go into a room or they're sitting waiting in a room and people come in, they don't know who those people are. It's very, very similar to the trafficking experience. The retelling of stories, we've discussed. Uncertainty and insecurity. So even if a young person's accommodation might be stable, which is not always there and often isn't, think about things like immigration status or the status of criminal charges, or whether someone's released under investigation for, cannabis cultivation or something. All this uncertainty and insecurity is really stressful and traumatic for young people. And it's exactly what they experience when they're trafficked, is that they didn't know where they were going to be 1 week to the next. They didn't know whether they'd have to go home. They didn't know where they were going to sleep. And a lot of young people are still in that sort of insecurity. Broken promises. I think professionals are getting better at this and a lot more reflective, really, and making sure that we're managing expectations. But we need to bear in mind that if we're promising something, obviously we have to try and make sure that we do it if we actually promise them. But even if we can assure them and promise them of something, they've been promised things a lot before and they've been deceived. So it's really difficult for them to hear promises, but it's even harder for them to, experience these promises being broken, because that is their whole experience of trafficking as well. Locked rooms, again, if you're looking at these different processes that I talked about before, these small windowless rooms, not knowing who's going to open the door and come into the room, being locked in rooms, sometimes it is it's very similar to their trafficking experience, and it is traumatic for them. Names. Does anyone know what I'm talking about there when I say names? You can just put it in the Zoom group chat. Why might something to do with names be re-traumatizing? Yeah, getting names wrong, common names of perpetrators. Yeah, that's right. So what we've realized is that a lot of young people, when they the names that we know them by aren't actually their names. It's a name that a trafficker has given them. It's the names that they was on, maybe false identity, exactly what's just been said, false identity documents that traffickers give the young people, and we need to check that we're actually using their right name. And again, like, if you reflect on it, you can kind of be horrified that sometimes we're not even, we don't even know children by their names. We know them by the name that the traffickers gave them. Okay, so safe accommodation. I'm just going to talk very briefly about this. As I said, it is such a massive topic. We have a whole day's training on it. Just some things to think about. There is no right answer to this, but we need to think very carefully, and we cannot assume, what conventional wisdom says is best for the child is actually best for the child. So in area or out of area, there's no real answer to this. I think for a long time there was a conventional wisdom that we should be moving children out of the area, and that they're safer out of the area. I certainly think that this is not always the case. me personally, if I was a social worker, I want a young person as close to me as possible so I can actually effectively safeguard them, instead of, you know, halfway around the country or somewhere where I can't meet with them a lot. Recent research has come out showing that out of area placements have higher rates of missing in terms of exploited young people and trafficked young people. So yeah, I just think we just need to be very careful. Some young people, it might be in their best interests, but to be out of area, but a lot of the time it isn't. Okay, so we need to think about where that young person's protective factors are. That it's true that there might be risks in a certain area, but there's also strengths in that area. So is it better to remove them from their strengths and move them somewhere else where they're still really vulnerable? Okay, so I think we need to speak to young people, see what they want to do. But I also understand that this is maybe slightly idealistic, and lots of local authorities will not give you much of a option of where accommodation is. But yeah. So foster care versus semi-independent. I've seen some local authorities now have a policy for unaccompanied and separated children who come into their care. They always put them in foster care regardless of the age. I think that this is a really good idea. So yeah, I think that foster care generally is always better. Even better if it can be foster care which has some sort of training or awareness of trafficking, then that is even better. There's a trend of young people, particularly around London, who they present themselves to local authorities, and then they are very keen to be in semi-independent care. And we might say to them, you know, oh, is it okay that you're in independent accommodation? And they're saying absolutely no. You know, but sometimes they're saying, yep, no problem, I really want to be in semi-independent or independent accommodation. We need to watch out for that. The reason why is because we're aware of people who are exploiting these children, telling them to get accommodation, and then older adult, you know, older men generally are staying with them in this house. So they're being exploited for the fact that they're young, and then they can get accommodation from children's services, and then these men move in. So we just need to be aware of that when we're speaking to you know, care homes and semi-independent units. They really are quite independent, and there's not a huge amount of monitoring in there, so we need to be aware of that. But as I've just seen on the chat, some saying lots of children don't want replacement parents. Absolutely. You know, generally I think it's a better move going towards foster care as the norm, instead of semi-independent care as the norm. But yeah, a lot of young people are very independent, particularly with the challenges that they've had recently, and yeah, they don't want that, and they find it very, very difficult being part of a family home that isn't their own. So as I said, we, you know, can't generalize on what is better for children. Prevention of missing needs to be central to whatever decisions are going on for safe accommodation. I'm not actually going to talk too much about that because of time, and it is a really big topic. And then linked to that is balancing rights of the child versus protections for the child. It's a really difficult balance to do, but you know, if we're thinking solely on safeguarding, it is reasonable to put in certain restrictions when we first come into contact with children, and when they first go into a certain accommodation. So we need to be very careful with that. But if we are putting in restrictions, which often are effective, we need to make sure we're explaining it properly to children. We need to make sure that we are sort of consulting them in the process. We need to make sure that we're communicating to them when these restrictions will be taken off as well. So it is a really hard balancing act. Different practitioners are in different places, but yeah, it's not easy, but it's just something that we need to think about. Okay, very quickly, I'm just going to go through these little Unintended consequences, I've probably thought missed some out, but this is just what came to mind. Some of them I'm sure some of you will be aware of, but others not. First of all, the NRM and asylum. I have spoken to this about this before when I did the NRM webinar. It can interact with the asylum process in quite complicated ways if you've got a young person going through both. Just to be aware that if you've put an NRM referral in for a young person, and they might be a young person from a country where their basis for international protection is not based on the trafficking, but it's based on something else. So an example is young people from Eritrea have a strong claim for international protection that isn't linked to their trafficking. So those cases can go through very quickly, but as soon as an NRM referral is put in, everything is slowed down on those asylum cases. So we've had young people before who have had their asylum cases halted and paused for sometimes years because of this NRM, and they didn't even know that what an NRM was, and they didn't even know that one had been put in for them. Also, if you think about asylum cases, it's all very controlled and careful, and the young person gets that legal representation. It's not the same in the NRM, but information can transfer from the NRM into asylum cases very easily. So we need to be aware that what we put on the NRM, if it is contradicting what is in someone's substantive statement or in any part of the asylum case, it can have what's called adverse credibility findings for young people. And that means that, they may look, whoever's making the decision, they look at the NRM and you've put in something that you suspect. So for example, you suspect that there's not only been forced criminalization or criminal exploitation, but you also are worried about sexual abuse. And if you don't put that in the NRM carefully, and say that this is just a suspicion of yours and you do not have evidence, then someone who's making a decision will look at the NRM and say, oh, there's criminal exploitation, there's sexual exploitation. But in the asylum case, there's no evidence, there's no mention of sexual exploitation, it's only criminal exploitation. Therefore, this young person has adverse credibility findings because their stories don't match up. And actually, the young person never mentioned anything about sexual abuse. And what it was just that a practitioner's suspicion. But that suspicion that in other referrals we might put in, because we put in our analysis, it can really harm the young person in terms of asylum. So it's something just to be aware of, that we need to be very precise and we need to be very accurate when we're doing NRMs. You ask leave. I know a lot of you who will work with unaccompanied children a lot, that you understand far better than I do how this sort of immigration law works. However, I worked in children's services as in child protection, general safeguarding team, and in youth offending, and I certainly didn't have any training on immigration law when I did my social work training. So I was not aware of what you ask leave is. And, general practitioners, they might not know what you ask leave is. And there's this false sense of security that goes around that if this young person has you ask leave, then it's all right. But that's certainly not the case. You ask leave is very, very precarious form of leave, and we need to be proactively supporting young people into having a better status than you ask leave. Compensation. In our advanced trafficking training course, we talk about how young people can apply for compensation for being child victims of trafficking. If it's possible, it should be considered, but just to be aware that if you're working with a young person and looking at compensation, we need to think whether it's in the child's best interest. I talk about it in more detail in our training, but there is a case where a law firm was representing the young person. Everyone thought it'd be really good to have the first case of a trafficked victim claiming compensation, but the court case was really long. They didn't manage it properly, so even the young person was under the age of 18. Her name was published. Because of that, there was a lot of she got a lot of negative feedback and treatment back where she came from, and it was very traumatic experience for her. She didn't get much money, and she never even picked up a check because the whole experience for her was really traumatic. So it might be in the young person's best interest to have compensation, but sometimes it might not be in their best interest. You know, and there might be organizations which have the best, you know, intentions at trying to create precedents for compensation, but it's not always actually best for that particular child. Similarly with family reunification, we need to support this if this is what the child wants, but we need to also make sure that the child has critically thought about this and considered it. We need to think about how the young person got into a situation of trafficking in the first place, and whether you know, family contact or family reunification can cause to lead to further trafficking. So we need to think carefully about it. If you're thinking about the British Red Cross family reunification process, it is quite specific, it is quite thorough. I know a lot of practitioners are frustrated because they're not allowed to sit in on meetings and they don't know what's happening. But if you speak to people in this program, they have thought this through, and they are very aware of it, and they do have their reasons why practitioners aren't involved in the process. But it's just something, again, that we need to think about, and it's not always what conventional wisdom says, which is that contact with the child may be the child's family may be best for them. Anything we do with the child, we need to think about whatever we're doing in the context of ongoing coercion and control. An example is if you're working with a young person who's being criminally exploited, and you know, there might be really worrying things about their behavior. You're trying to manage the child, you're trying to support the child and support their decision making. And naturally part of that might be some sort of, you know, social learning theory principles of actions and consequences. And that's possibly fine, but we need to think about how we're working with that child. We need to think about that in the context that they still might be being controlled and they still might be being coerced. If I reflect on some of the young people that I work with when they're being criminally exploited, actually you need to manage your work with them differently to young people who aren't being controlled or being coerced. So we need to be very careful about that and think about, actually, are we making things worse because of how we're working with them in that context? We talked about it before. I think a lot of people mentioned it in one of those Menti slides, but broken trust. All of this that I've talked about, all of what young people have said before, it can lead to broken trust with professionals. And this can even be when you're doing everything right. An example is that if we need to share safeguarding information with other professionals, they might, young people we're working with might feel betrayed by that possibly, and that might break their trust, and it is possible that it's going to happen. So we need to think about how we are communicating to young people, and if we can do it in a way that we explain when we share information, you know, then maybe we can maintain that trust. And all of the above as well, as I've kind of already said, it can lead to re-trafficking. So we just need to be very aware of that, and, you know, always conscious of that possibility. And there are also plenty of other ones. I'm sure other people can maybe think of their own. I know that I haven't sort of talked about all of them, but yeah, they are all there. So not too long left. What can we do? What I purposefully haven't done in this session is not talked about child-centered practice. As practitioners in this field, you have already had that training and you already know what it means to be child-centered. This is, in addition, we're talking about child victims trafficking. It's a very complex process. It's a complex professional process around that child. So that's what I've kind of focused on, is where our blind spots are as practitioners. But whatever I've said, it doesn't replace what is normally best practice in terms of child-centered working. We need to make sure that we're including young people in decisions. We need to make sure that we are explaining things properly to the child, and we need to make sure that we're reflective enough that in the moment we can make sure what we're doing is child-centered. One of the main things that we can do is have accountability for other professionals. By the fact that you're here, you probably know a lot more about trafficking than other professionals who will be working with this child. And we need to watch other professionals, and we need to support other professionals. You know, maybe they don't have the same awareness of trafficking as you do, but we also need to ensure that they're doing their job properly. We do this a lot with legal representatives. We work with some excellent legal representatives, but we also work with some representatives who certainly are not practicing in a way that's best interest for the child. And I think it's really important, and something that we do in our training to social workers is that we talk about with social workers what solicitors' professional obligations are in terms of minimum contact and stuff, and we sort of talk about how we can spot poor practice. And it's really important that us as professionals can spot poor legal practice with young people, because then we can support them in maybe getting new legal advocacy before it's too late. We have worked with a lot of young people where, you know, their asylum cases have gone on for years. Solicitors aren't front loading cases, so they're sort of putting asylum cases in with minimal amounts of work and kind of hoping for the best, and then if it's refused, only then do they put in the work. But that is certainly not what's best for the child. So we, you know, when we're working with legal professionals, we do support them because they have a very difficult job, but we make sure that they're trying to sort of get everything together first time round, and they're front loading these cases instead of waiting for appeals to happen before putting in the work. The other thing to consider is getting a young person an advocate or a guardian. I don't know how many of you are in places which have independent child trafficking guardians. This is a service run by Bernardo's. It now covers 1/3 of all local authorities in the country. So we're far away from full coverage, which is what should have been done by now. It was put into legislation in the Modern Slavery Act in 2015, but we're 5 years later and we still haven't got past 1/3 covered. In general, when I was a professional working directly with young people, I would resist the idea of referring out to other professionals because a lot of professional networks were already too large. But something I would say is that the evidence is there for independent child trafficking guardians, that they do really make a difference in young people's cases, because they have one person who is a guardian and solely focused on the trafficking in mind. And it's hard to hear that as a professional, because you're thinking, well, I'm the young person social worker, I've got their best interests in mind. But they are really helpful, and it has been proven in research and independent evaluation that they do improve the outcomes. So yeah, just to be aware, please look them up. If you're not in an area which has independent child trafficking guardians, look at other advocacy services. There is a national youth advocacy service where you can refer young people to have advocates for them, and it's something that I would certainly consider as well. Okay, So we're coming towards the end there. I know there's lots of that's been talked about on the group chat. Sorry, I haven't been reading it. It's just that I lose my train of thought when that happens. If you go to the Mentimeter page, which was there before, you should be able to go to a question and answer page. And if you have any questions, then you can put that in. If I just move to there. It's disappeared. Okay, here it is. So I can go back. So if you have any questions, I'm not going to be able to answer all of them, but please do write them on, and then I'll try and answer them before we go. So I'm just going to go back to the presentation. So all of our training has moved online. We're starting next week with a safe accommodation and child victims of trafficking going missing course. But these are a full list of the training courses that we run. Actually, it's not a full list. We also run an advanced trafficking course, but this is longer. And we need to think about how exactly we're going to be doing that online. So please go to our website if you're interested in any of this training. Or you can email me and ask any questions that you want about the training. We've moved to a modular format, so all of this was a full day training. Instead, now we're running each training on 2 half-day sessions, apart from the spiritual abuse and child trafficking course, which we're now running as a one session. So please do book on. They are useful. We're trying to make them as interactive as possible. We're going to have low numbers in them, unlike on this webinar, so we are able to have discussions and more interactive sort of activities as part of the training, and it means that I will continue to have a job. So yeah, please do. Please go to our website if you want our e-news. It's not too often, but it is informative. You can also follow us on Twitter. That's a way that we sort of try and post updated information about this. And you can support our campaigns. So our main campaign is around sustainable futures for young people, and stable futures, sorry. It's focusing on guardianship for young people, as well as sort of them getting more access to discretionary leave as well to remain. But then apart from that, thank you very much for joining me. I'm going to go and answer some of the questions now. Again, if you've asked a question on the chat, I wouldn't have seen it just because I haven't been able to read all of it. However, if you ask on the Mentimeter, then I should be able to. So will training information be sent to attendees? So what I can do is I can send a PDF of these slides. I'm not sure how useful they'll be because I don't tend to put too many words on slides, but I can send that out. Are there any job vacancies at ECPAT? Not at the moment. Watch this space. There might be. I'd say what I would do if that whoever's asked that, when I was a social worker, I signed up to ECPAT's e-news for training that I was interested in and getting updates on child trafficking. And then obviously, because I was signed up, I managed to see straight away when there was a job going for ECPAT. How do we effectively support trafficked young people who are banned from going out alone by their local authorities for months on end? Yeah, it's really, really difficult. I'm not aware of, I've never worked directly with local authorities that have prevented young people going out alone for that many months. That is absolutely really difficult. What I would be saying to you is, are you part of their multi-agency professionals meetings? Can we get this decision about not being able to go out alone? Can we look at whether that's negotiable and whether it's necessary in terms of managing the risk? That's what I would be saying, because that sounds like a very difficult situation to be in. Oh, sorry. I've just gone back. Okay. Can I send confirmation that we're taking part in the webinar? If you email me, then I can do that, but I won't be doing that as a rule for everyone, just because we've had lots of people coming. Can we share links for research you mentioned, please? Yeah, if I'm just going to turn to the chat. If you're able to, if you just discuss what pieces of research that you're talking about, I may be able to quickly access it. Also, just before we go, if there are no more questions, then on the following page, if I can go to the next page, if there are any other topics that you'd like us to cover, yeah, then please let us know. People are commenting about more in-depth sessions. Yes, we do have them. Those are our day training sessions, but we don't provide them in the format of free training, free webinars. Again, something about country-specific webinars. I could look into that, but we, again, in our training, we look at, one of our training has a whole half day of looking at country profiles. Trauma-informed practice, okay, that's coming up a lot. It's in our training, but I'm just wondering whether I can transfer it. Okay, how foster carers can support trafficked young people. Okay, what I would recommend in terms of foster carers supporting trafficked young people, our safe accommodation and missing from care training, we have a form of that training which is solely focused on foster carers, and we solely deliver to foster carers. You know, mostly when we do that training, we actually do multi-agency groups, so we have fostering social workers, looked after social workers, foster carers and care home staff. And it's actually one of my favourite trainings to deliver, actually, and it's really useful to have all those professionals there in the same room. So yeah, if you look at our safe accommodation training. Great. I'll stay here for a little bit longer, but thanks very much for joining. I know that it was a bit clunky today. This is my first time using this platform. It's also the first time since April I've delivered any sort of training. So I know I'm a bit rusty. Thanks for bearing with us. Please do get in contact with if you're interested in any training. And yeah, hope to see you again.